What's going on, my fellow Kino Lords? So today I'm going to be talking about The Brutalist, which is a film that's written and directed by Brady Corbett and stars Adrian Brody. So The Brutalist is considered the biggest film of 2024. Um, this film it's already everybody's already placing bets that it's going to win Best Picture at the Oscars, and it's just like this gargantuan 3 hour and 30 minute event that hardly anybody has had access to until right now. I wanted to watch it before my top 20 of 2024 video, but otherwise I would have had to wait until now to make that video, and I just felt like nah, fuck that. I'll just have to review this movie on its own when it finally gets to me, because A24 just like they gatekeeped the shit out of this movie until now. Now obviously now it's gotten a bit of a wider release, which is great, but damn, it shit took forever. And in terms of Brady Corbett's filmography, the only film that I recall seeing from him is Vox Lux. And to be honest, that movie didn't do it for me. That movie was just kind of a nothing burger. Like, it started out with promise, and then it just felt like a flatline. And I don't know. I don't want to get into that, but I'll just say that that movie didn't do it for me. I thought it was really underwhelming. And I know the movie has its fans out there, and they say, oh, you just didn't like it because you didn't get it. Whatever. Maybe I'm stupid. That's a possibility. Um, but I didn't like that movie. So, going into this movie, that's all I had to go off of. But I knew just from watching the trailer that The Brutalist is a whole different fucking monster of a movie. Like, it looks nothing like Vox Lux. Obviously, a lot more ambitious of a film. So I was like, all right, let's see what this is all about. And, yeah, I gotta, look, after watching The Brutalist, I gotta say, this is probably the most complicated relationship that I've ever had with the movie, at least in quite some time. And there's reasons as to why that is. Um, I'll just say outright, one of them it has to do with the whole Zionist propaganda thing, which I'll just say I don't think it's Zionist propaganda, just to get that out of the way. But I could definitely see why people do. And, and yeah, I'll just leave it at that for now. But I do want you all to know that I think that this is a great movie, because I think this movie, like as a whole, is a very nuanced and layered film, and it's incredibly dense, and it's very ambitious, and it's actually like shockingly provocative, a lot more provocative than I anticipated. Just whether it be like its depiction of graphic sexuality and especially sexual violence in this movie, something that I did not expect at all. But it felt purposeful and meaningful, and I think is pretty much essential to the staying power and to the impact that this movie has on the viewer. Um, and again, just I think there's like a lot of thematic intention behind the way that it is being provocative. But yeah, yeah. First, I want to talk about why I did really enjoy this movie. I'll talk about the stuff that I am still kind of on the fence about and feel a bit icky about. But right now, let's just talk about why I really like this movie. First of all, Brady Corbett really brought his A game here. Like, he really just went to town. He presents this movie in this grandiose, again, 3 hour and 30 minute gargantuan epic, basically. And I mean, look, there's an overture in the beginning. There's an intermission in the middle. There's an epilogue, and just the way that the movie presents itself through the cinematography and the direction, especially the score, it all just feels. It feels like, again, you're like attending this event of a movie. It feels huge and larger than life, and I think that he was able to achieve that incredibly well. I love the score in this movie. I think the score is it's a huge part of why I think the presentation really works as well, because he combines this kind of like dark and ominous sound, like there's something off all the time, but combines it with this like triumphant and celebratory sound that sounds uplifting, and you kind of get that throughout the entire film. There's some moments that feel more like casual and relaxed with piano and stuff like that, but I think like the more effective parts and the more kind of like the more like jaw dropping emotional sounds that it has is from that odd combination of like ominous trumpet sounds or ominous piano with these big like orchestral moments that I think are really effective for the movie. Because it makes the messages and the tone of everything feel that much more twisted and off-putting, and it's just really really effective. I love the score to this movie. Um, and yeah, like it's just a craft. Like this film, I feel like again it's 3 hours and 30 minutes long, but honestly, like I didn't feel like it overstayed its welcome, and the flow of it felt elegant. Like it felt like it was flowing from one thing to the next, and there was never really like a stretch of the film that I felt like, why are we here? Why are we doing this? Especially by the end of it, um, it all seems purposeful enough. And yeah, like I think the craft and what Brady Corbett brought to the table is definitely like exceptional, and he deserves a lot of praise for it. Um, and Adrian Brody in this movie is so fucking really all the performances in this movie are fantastic, but like Adrian Brody again, absolutely fucking killing it in this movie. He has to showcase just a wide range of emotions, really odd and complex moments of emotion that are really weird. And again, it goes back to those depictions of sexuality. One scene in particular that I won't spoil, but involves him and his wife in bed. It's a sexual scene, but it's a very like harrowing type of sexual scene that was just really, again, I mean, not only in terms of vision, like as a filmmaker is that like out there, but for an actor to portray that, I think is really difficult, and he did an excellent job. Again, everybody did an excellent job though. Like everybody in this movie did. Guy Pearce in this movie, holy shit, what a son of a bitch. I mean, that's putting it lightly, but Guy Pearce in this movie is a fucking monster. That dude is to me one of the most evil characters I've seen in a movie in a long time. And I like how it builds up to it because like at first you think, yeah, he's an asshole. He's like a rich capitalistic American scumbag, but like whatever. We've seen a lot of them, but like what it leads to and what it builds to with this character, holy shit. Props to him for, being able to portray this role. And even agreeing to do it because goddamn. But yeah, he's great. And I just think like also it feels like it feels thematically layered, and it feels like it has a lot of depth. It's a very dense movie with, I think, a lot to say all over the place. There's a lot here about drug addiction among the impoverished in America. Um, there's there's a lot here about the bastardization of art, specifically with Adrian Brody's character, who again, like conceptually, what his movie is you have a Jewish immigrant coming to America, and um, basically all that what this movie is in a nutshell is kind of the perverse reality of the American dream through the foreigner's eyes. Because not just Jewish people. This film makes it clear, like it's Jewish people and just foreigners in general who have this very twisted reality of what the American dream actually is. And Adrian Brody's character is this extremely talented architect with so much vision. And not Brady Corbett, Guy Pearce's character, he's again like this really like this super wealthy American entrepreneur capitalist dude who really is like desperate to make a name for himself. And he basically like preys upon Adrian Brody's character and through his talents to make him something big, like it's this gigantic building. But it's really for Guy Pearce. He's only got him so he can make a bigger name for himself because he doesn't really have any talent except for being wealthy. Um, and um, and again, it's kind of like, as I mentioned before I got lost in the sauce, about the bastardization of art and how not only is like Guy Pearce being like very capitalistic with the way he's viewing Adrian Brody's art form, but even the society and the community around him is forcing this very Christian and nationalistic vision onto Adrian Brody's vision and to his art piece. And yeah, like overall, like there's a lot here. There really is. Like there's a lot here to read into that doesn't really have anything to do with the whole like, controversial Zionist thing, which I'll get to in just a second. Um, but yeah, like ultimately this film is showcasing how fucked up the American dream is to foreigners. And like the shit that they have to deal with, you know, even though they're much more talented and much more knowledgeable than your average American, that shit don't matter because here in America, um, you're not gonna get what the American dream should be giving you. You're gonna have to deal with a bunch of bullshit, and and it gets really dark. Like it gets insanely dark in portraying that. And I'm trying to be very vague here because I don't want to give anything away, but it gets very fucking morbid and very dark, and it is largely why I think this film will have staying power. So yeah, like overall, like I think the performances are fantastic. Thematically, there's a lot here. The craft is to me really great, and I could definitely see like why people really really love this movie. Like it makes sense. Um, so with that being said, let's talk about the Zionist stuff because I do think that even though I don't necessarily view this as like Zionist propaganda, I can completely understand why people do. And intentionally chooses to be ambiguous with the Zionist angle of the movie because here you have Adrian Brody's character and you have his family who are these Jewish immigrants who are experiencing living in a country that does not want them, and at every turn they're dealing with torture and torment mentally or physically. And um you know ultimately this movie, there's conversations about Zionism. His niece wants to return to Israel because it's her duty as a Jewish woman, and there's this whole debate that happens at the dinner table, which I think is interesting. But ultimately, I think the problem with it is that in today's climate, like in with the realities, knowing about what's going on in Gaza and in Israel, this movie could have really benefited from being a bit more clearer on its stance and also being, um, I don't know, a bit more informative on the creation of the state of Israel. Um, because again, there's no discussion here, and there's no like information to the audience about the colonization of Palestinian land. And I think that if this movie just like mentioned, even like for a second, um, how the state of Israel came to be, or had some maybe sort of backlash between characters about the colonization of Palestinian land, then perhaps people would have not been so harsh on this movie. And also the ending to this movie, which by the way, like at first I read into that as like, damn, what the hell? Like why would they like write the dialogue in that way? Because the ending has a very, I think on the surface, like I feel like is undoubtedly very pro-Zionist. Um, but the way, but after hearing more interpretations of it and really reflecting on it, I think that the ending to this movie could actually be read into a almost anti-Zionist way. Maybe not anti, but a more neutral way in reference to Adrian Brody's character. Um, but I won't get too into it until I get my rating. After I give my rating, I'll do a quick spoiler rundown. I'm not gonna get too crazy with it, but I don't want to dive into the, like the real and like really into the nitty gritty until I give my rating. Um, but all I'll say is that yeah, like I feel like it can be a little bit icky because I feel like this movie is like as a whole, it feels like a very, because of the way that the Zionist stuff is written in a way, and because it's ambiguous with it, it really does kind of feel like a a sympathetic validation of why Jewish people are colonizing Palestinian land and are going to Israel. And I understand that, like, historically, it makes sense for these characters at the time, considering everything that they have dealt with, considering their ideology, like why they would want to go to Israel. But But again, as a film and as a filmmaker coming out with a film in 2024, it feels like, why necessarily go out of your way to make this big movie that validates the colonization of that land? And I understand it's just for the history of this, but the timing just feels a little bit insensitive. And again, maybe if it brought up Palestine even once, like at least uttered the name Palestine, then I think people would have not been so harsh on it. But anyway, I'll just say, in terms of rating, I think that this is still a great movie. Even if you don't even know anything about the Zionist stuff, like I think that even if, especially if you don't even care about that, you don't have that shit in your head, then I think that you can get a lot out of it. So, and the craft is like, to me, really great. So I'll go with a soft 8 for it. And I also think Brady Corbett's recent award speech, where he mentioned that that he's really supporting the distribution for no other land, I think that's super based. I think that's awesome. Huge support for the West Bank and Palestine with that one. I really want to see no other land. I don't know if I'm gonna be. I mean, I don't want to be able to do that because they're like, fuck, again, no one wants to distribute it, sadly. But anyway, yeah. So I'll have to 8 out of 10 for the Brutalist. And yeah, with that said, I'll dive into some specifics about the ending for those who want to hear. But basically, at the end of this movie, it fast forwards to when Adrian Brody's character is incredibly old. He's basically like old and decrepit, and he basically can't even talk. He doesn't even have lines in the end. But it's like, it fast forwards to when he's super old, and we're at this like exhibition hosted by his niece, the one that had a Zionist attitude about moving to Israel, and she did. And she basically speaks for him about his life's work and, what it all means. She even dives into like, explaining his ideas behind certain things, like especially behind like the buildings and everything. And then she says something very suspect at the very end, which she says, no matter what anybody tells you, it's about the destination and not the journey. And I think, again, upon like face value, I was like, that is fucking sus. I don't like that. That to me like seems like, again, a very like pro-Zionist statement. But after reflecting on it and reading other people's interpretations of it, I don't know if I read it that way anymore, because when you look at the film and you look at the ending, Adrian Brody's character really never supported going to Israel. He gave her pushback when she said, when his niece said that earlier in the film. He only later on agreed with his wife to move because of her and out of the love for her. And I think even in the end, he probably didn't even move. He probably didn't even move to Israel because of the fact that the buildings that were being showcased there in the end were like from the 70s, and that was like in Connecticut or something. So it seemed like he still like did not go to Israel. But the reason why I bring this up is because he seems to be at a stage in his life really old, like he's super old. He's basically he's silenced in a way because he seems like he can't even speak. And you have his niece that is basically speaking for him. He's voiceless and she's speaking for him. And she's saying things that he doesn't even necessarily condone. Like, first of all, she's explaining a lot of the shit about the buildings. I don't think he supported, like, really explaining the meaning behind all of his artistic ideas. And then, on top of that, he never really had a Zionist attitude, but in the end, his niece turns his life's work exhibition into this political statement that I don't think he even agreed with. So I think I kind of view the ending now as more of like a tragedy to Adrian Brody's character, in the sense that his artwork has never been pure, because you had Guy Pearce's character who turned it into like my dick is bigger than yours kind of thing, and then you have the Christian community that forced him to put a chapel in it, and then you have him here now, like about basically on his deathbed, his niece going up there and politicizing his career's work. And I don't think, by like the way that his by the way that Adrian Brody's character is sitting there like without a voice, I think it's almost like a tragedy. Like if that's the way I think it's a really valid interpretation of viewing it. So yeah, I don't know if that was the intention. I don't know if I'm off base for that, but I think that is actually a pretty valid way to look at it. I've heard its interpretation from multiple people, and it just kind of makes sense to me now. Um, so yeah, and again, you could just watch it and be like, no, like this is just, because that's the way I viewed it at first. I still think that's a valid way, and that's why it still kind of bothers me, because you could view it and be like, oh yeah, pro-Zionism, and then you could also view it and be like, oh no, this is actually a very subtle anti-Zionist ending. But I think most people wouldn't read into it that way, which is why it still bothers me a little bit. But anyway, that's all I'll say about it. Sorry it got dark and fucking stupid and green. I was trying to fix it putting the lights on, but my car wanted to go into brain rot mode. But anyway, that's all I got to say about The Brutalist. I still feel like I have a complicated relationship with this movie, but overall, I do think that it is a great movie and does offer a lot. I think this is a very layered and dense movie, about the perverse realities of the American dream to foreigners, and I think it's overall a pretty rewarding achievement. So yeah, that's all I'll say, guys. I hope you guys really enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, share it amongst your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to be updated on more film-related content.